The world we live in is ever-changing. We can learn a lot from the dead. I'm Sandy Jean, your host, and this is Sandy Cemeteries, Tracing History. We'll learn about some of the oldest towns in the nation, as well as the interesting people who are buried there. Ready? Let's go. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Sandy Cemeteries. It's been a while and I'm glad to be back with you. Boy, do I have some great stories for you today. And they all center around Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Let's get started, shall we? I wasn't planning on telling you about this cemetery for episode 3. I'd actually chosen a cemetery in Manchester, Vermont. One of my favorite places to visit. The history is rich in Vermont, and Manchester does not disappoint. However, I felt it necessary to bring this all but abandoned cemetery to your attention. The sooner, the better. You see, it has a story to tell. I have the means to tell you that story, and so here we are. The story, well, at least for me, begins in September of this past year, 2021. The story for the souls buried in the cemetery at Asylum Point in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, began many, many years before. The official name of the cemetery at Asylum Point is the Winnebago State Mental Institute Cemetery, in operation from 1873 to 1972. My husband Dave and I, from Central New York State, were in Oshkosh while visiting my best friend Todd. You guys know Todd. Being the lovers of history and all things interestingly creepy that we are, the cemetery, of course, was a natural place to do some sightseeing. The Northern State Hospital for the Insane, as it was originally called, opened on the shore of Lake Winnebago in 1873. The original building, with a capacity of 500 beds, is now gone. Capacity was said to be 650 by 1891, and by 1932, the facility housed 864 patients with 164 staff members and an official capacity of 727. The name was changed to Winnebago State Hospital in the 1930s, then to Winnebago Mental Health Institute in the 1970s. Now, over the years, not only were hospital patients buried there, but also the poor, the orphaned, stillborn babies. Anyone without a home or a family could possibly be found buried in this cemetery. With the opening of the hospital, the area soon came to be known as Asylum Point. Today, it's a great place for hiking and fishing with beautiful waters and a fantastic trail. Along that very same trail lies the 145-year-old cemetery where the hospital's unclaimed residents have been laid to rest. As we started down the trail, I was impressed by how well-worn and actually beautiful the trail was. And within 5 minutes, we were standing at the gates of the cemetery. These gates were 2 large white cement pillars. Also at the entrance, a wooden hand-carved sign bearing the name of the cemetery, the dates of operation, and a quote, "Life lends us only feet. Death gives us wings." At first glance, you might think that you're looking at an open, empty field with a flagpole stuck in the middle. But actually, there are more than 800 graves on this piece of land. The Winnebago Land Genealogical Society has identified just under 250 of those graves. Most graves are unmarked. Some just have a small stone with a number set into the ground. Now, as I walked into the cemetery, I could feel the sadness, the loneliness, the confusion. Todd and I could even at times feel them watching us from the edge of the forest, maybe looking for understanding, for acknowledgement. Here are just a few of their stories. In plot number 17 lies the body of Martin Bowman. This is Martin's story, or what we know of it, taken directly from the Door County Advocate. January 11th, 1872. A narrow escape. A young man named Martin Bowman, living at Washington Island, was brought up here yesterday evening with both feet badly frozen. He left the island a week ago Tuesday for the mainland, and while on his way across, the wind broke up the ice, carrying him off on it. At one time, he was thrown in the water, losing his axe, but managed to get out again. He finally got ashore on Plum Island, where he remained 5 days and nights living on some bread he had with him, until the ice again formed when he escaped to the mainland. Both his feet and boots were encased in a solid mass of ice. He was kindly cared for at Hedgehog Harbor, and his feet dressed and was brought up here by Mr. H.P. Jacobs. He is now at the Sturgeon Bay House under the charge of Dr. McKeacham, who thinks that his feet can be saved. February 1st, 1872. Amputated. The young man, Martin Bowman, whose feet were recently so severely frozen as mentioned in the Advocate week before last, had his right foot amputated last Tuesday below the knee. The operation was performed by Drs. Young and McKeacham of this place. A similar operation will have to be performed on the other leg as soon as the patient is able to bear it. February 8th. Martin Bowman, whose right leg was amputated week before last, had half of his left foot amputated last Thursday by Drs. McKeacham and Young. He seems to be doing well, and the doctors express an opinion that he will recover. February 15th, 1872. Martin Bowman, the man whose right leg and left foot was amputated lately, is getting along finely, with a good chance for his ultimate recovery. June 6, 1872. Sheriff Simon left on the steamer Union last Thursday morning with an insane man, Martin Bowman, for the insane asylum at Madison. The patient is the man who was so severely frozen at the door last winter as to render amputation of one leg and the other foot necessary. December 3rd, 1874. Died. Martin Bowman, who some years ago resided at Washington Harbor and had both legs amputated from the effects of freezing, died a short time since. After the operation on his legs was performed, he became insane and was confined first in the insane asylum at Madison and afterwards in the Northern Asylum near Oshkosh, where he was at the time of his death. William D. Brooks is buried in grave number 159. His last will was signed on 12 May, 1883, and probate was started on 8 July, 1884. In between, he was committed to Northern State, buried at WMHI on May 20th, 1884. William married Susan Robbins on 16 December 1849 in Indiana. They had at least 3 children, Charles, Laura, and Daniel. Susan died in 1869. He next married Mrs. Antoinette Brooks on 7 August 1869. It's believed that she was William's brother's widow. Her husband, John Brooks, had died in 1863. William and Antoinette must have divorced because they are living separately less than a year later in 1870, and William remarried in 1873. Antoinette returned to Indiana with several of her children and died there in 1884. He next married Sarah Van Arsdale Chichester on 21 July 1873 in Waupaca County, Wisconsin. She was divorced from her first husband and had 5 children under the age of 15 when they married. William died at the age of 54. Frederick Dahlberg is buried in grave number 496. Frederick died of cirrhosis of the liver. He was a married white male, insane, a saloon keeper, 34 years old, and born about 1870 in Sweden. His residence was in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. It was noted that Frederick was an alcoholic. Americus Jackson is buried in grave number 278. He was a white male, a farmer, 56 years old, and born about 1833 in Vermont. Americus served as a private in Company B, 1st Wisconsin Infantry, from 18 November 1863 to 20 September 1865. His Civil War record states he was drafted in November of 1863 and was mustered out in September of 1864. He enlisted again in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Americus was transferred from the 1st Wisconsin Infantry to the 21st Wisconsin Infantry Company H. At the end of the war, he was transferred to the 3rd Wisconsin because regiments were consolidating, and he was mustered out in June of 1865. His brothers' names? Hiram and Freedom Jackson. Gustave Lavigne was born in 1820, the youngest son and child of Jean-Baptiste Brodeur de Lavigne and Elizabeth Ulrich. He was mostly known as Gus, and sometimes also cited as Gust or Gustave. He and his brother Jean-Baptiste Bat Jr. moved to Stevens Point in 1844, and by 1850 was residing in Woods County. For most of his life, Gus worked as a river pilot and was considered one of the best river pilots to pilot rafts along the Little Bull Falls. In one instance, he saved the life of 2 men who were trapped on a small rock between the raging waters of Little Bull Falls. These men were William Kentucky Bill Wigginton and a Mr. Campbell, who would later become the city marshal for the city of Dubuque. Gus was given the keys of the city by Mr. Campbell as thanks for saving his life. He was declared insane on 16 October 1899 and was sent to Northern State Asylum, where he would die not so long after on 25 October 1899. Each and every life buried in the Winnebago State Mental Institute Cemetery deserves to have their story told. Each life, young, old, rich, or poor, deserved that dignity. They existed. They mattered. Thank you for sharing this time with me to honor just a few of the lives that are forever bound to the Winnebago State Mental Institute Cemetery. Hopefully, they have some peace. I plan on returning this summer to pay my respects with just a little bit more knowledge, understanding, and even compassion than I had on my first visit. Well, that's all for episode 3 of Sandy Cemeteries. Thanks so much for joining me, and I can't wait to bring you a brand new story very, very soon. Be sure to follow our Facebook page, The Sandy and Toddcast, for more information about upcoming episodes of Sandy Cemeteries, Tracing History. Todd and I also have a brand new podcast called the Empathicary Podcast, and that has its own page as well. You can find that like that on Facebook. And make sure that you join our group, Stay Weirdos, Friends of the Sandy and Toddcast. It's a very safe space for thoughts, opinions, feelings, ideas, questions, non-judgmental, and everybody in there has a great time. Until next time, I'm Sandy Jean, and thank you again for joining me for Sandy Cemeteries, Tracing History.